And I tell people all the time, my job is to make it hard for them to leave. I realize that they don't all have the same mindset that I do, or that some of the people that have been in law enforcement for a long time. But if we create a team and we value each other, we make it hard for them to leave and go somewhere else because they already know it's going to be different.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Blah 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 Something Wellness Podcast brought to you by the National Police Podcast Network. I am your host, Tami Sharp, joined by my partner in all things, Chris Zamora. And we have a couple new faces. I love new faces. It's always fun, new conversation. We are talking about what makes a great leader. And we have a couple great leaders with us today. So, Earl and Shawn, thank you guys for being here. Earl, will you go ahead and introduce yourself first? And then Shawn, I will have you introduce yourself.
Sure. As Earl Morrison, I've been in law enforcement. This is my 32nd year. I am currently a police chief in Broken Bow, Oklahoma. Lots of fun stuff to do here. Learned a lot over the years, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you. Shawn.
Shawn Boyle. I'm currently the police chief in Yakima, Washington. I started my law enforcement or military career in 1991, and then I've been in the city of Yakima for about 30 years. Started as a corrections officer, and I've worked my way through the ranks up to being the chief at this point. And we're located in Central Washington, town of about 100,000 people, and our police department is 124 sworn officers, and we have a city jail. So,
Awesome.
but there's a lot to do in Central Washington. Probably not for a police podcast, but there's a lot to do. So.
There's a lot to do.
There's wine tasting breweries and things like that. So outdoors, skiing, rivers. So there's a lot of things that would attract you to Central Washington.
Sure. You guys got, I will say, you got pretty decent weather for the most part. I mean, being from the other side of the mountains, I am biased, but props to Eastern Washington.
We are the Palm Springs of Washington, 300 days of sun.
Yeah. We'd always go over and go hit the lakes and go to Eastern Washington for the summer and just really be hot.
Yeah.
But not Arizona hot. So I'd take Eastern Washington over Arizona summers any day. Well, thank you guys for being here. And we are talking about what makes a great leader. And one of the common themes throughout the episodes that we've done already is that it's not always necessarily the great leaders that create a great leader. Sometimes it is the toxic leaders that create the environment for somebody to emerge as a great leader. So I want to back it up to kind of the beginning of your careers. And actually, I started this the last episode we did where I took it even further into kind of our childhood and our youth. So growing up, were you natural leaders or did you have to learn kind of how to step into that role? And then when you got into law enforcement, kind of what was leadership like? Did you have good mentors or did you have mentors that you learned rough lessons from? And whichever want to unpack that whole loaded question first.
I'll start. I don't know. I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, about 3,000 people, and I wasn't a natural leader. I kind of like to blend into the mix. That's like forced growing up, but just kind of like to blend into the mix. I went in the army. I spent 5 years, and kind of had a kind of an array of leaders. There were good and bad. I think we'll probably talk about good and bad, and you get some from both of that. Um, a lot of what I saw is the people that really became engaged growing up as people like engaged actually cared about who you were, had questions for you, got to know who you were and what your goals were and how could they make them facilitate them. I remember having a sergeant first class in the army who realized everybody wasn't going to make the military a career. And a lot of us didn't plan on it, but really spoke about education and what that can do for you once you get out, either if you stayed in the military or get out of the military. And, he treated you, unfortunately in the military, there's strict rules and regulations, but he treated you as a kind of as an adult in the military. You get a lot of freedom to do things as long as you showed you have the ability and the willingness to be a part of the team, but also to have the to show you're an adult. You could be responsible. You could get your work done. And then he kind of was the first probably great leader that I would say. He was the E7 in the Army and kind of just treated us like adults. Talked about what your future goals were, and if it wasn't with the military, he wanted to see you succeed. And that was kind of like I think my base of that. And then I'll let Earl kind of talk about it pre law enforcement if he wants to.
So for me, mine was I grew up. You thought yours was small. I grew up in a town of about 400. So there, I mean, there's not a lot of leaders. You do certain things, and everybody knows what you do. So for me, it was always trying to make sure I was doing the right thing, and it kind of molded me into being a leader for the right reasons and setting good examples. And then I too went into the military and in the Army, and there I had a lieutenant that just the way he was young, but he always engaged all of us. He never acted like he was better than us. He always treated us like we were just as much a part of the team, as anybody else. And, a lot of times when you're there and you have leaders, especially in the military with the rank and the difference between the NCOs and the officers, they usually treated you a little bit differently, and it wasn't good. So from him, I learned, how to treat people, and how to respect people. And then into my military career, I kinda had the opposite from, the military into law enforcement, is that I had some okay leaders. They weren't bad per se, but they didn't wanna develop anybody. They didn't wanna mentor anybody. They didn't wanna teach anybody because when I came in, it was like if you learned anything, if you got an education, if you learned the job, then everybody felt threatened instead of felt like you were actually building a team and a program, which is what I had just learned in the military, and then it was a little bit different, in law enforcement. And so for that, it helped me want to learn more about how to be a better leader, and how to grow and develop people, in every facet that I could.
I have a question with the military because Shawn, you'd said, not everybody got into the military to make it their career. And some people would do that. Now, let's bring that into law enforcement because with recruitment and retention being pain points for a lot of agencies, back in the day you got into law enforcement, you kind of knew the intention was you're getting into it to be in it and you're going to be there for the next 20 to 30 years. But you have people getting in with the younger generation specifically that's not the mindset anymore. And so I think some of the older generation is looking at that and a little confused and frustrated with it, being like, what do you mean you're going to go through the academy and FTO and go through all of these steps and you're just going to do it for 4 or 5 years? Like that doesn't compute to a lot. So let's, as leaders now, let's have that conversation of maybe how agencies can approach the mindset a little bit differently that maybe some people are getting into law enforcement. They don't plan to do a 20-year career. Maybe they only do want to do 7 or 8. And how can we look that, like reframe it to being a positive?
It's a challenge, I think. I mean, I get into this knowing that I was going to do it for the rest of my, hopefully, I mean, God willing, and the ability to do it. It was make a career of it, get to retirement and be able to, retire young and be able to either do something else or just decide to move on. So it is hard. I think, but we've had some young men and women leave and just I think the biggest thing we can do as I don't know how you try to convince them this is a career that they want to do, give them opportunities. We have a lot of opportunities with our organization for specialty assignments. Um, but I think once they do make that decision, be as supportive as you can to them and help them, whatever it is that they want to, whatever their next endeavor is, I guess, be supportive to them and you know, I just tell them I just met with a kid last week that wasn't successful in its probationary period. We think he'll be successful in maybe a smaller agency. And I reached out to another chief and said, hey, this guy may work good at your agency. And he left positive, but he had nothing but positive things about our police department. And I want him to be successful. I want him to make a career if he chooses to stay in law enforcement. But I think the biggest thing is just being supportive of them, what it is that their future goals. And I think it's really hard for me I can't see myself going on and doing anything else, especially if I was going to do this for 10 years and really become invested in it and want to be successful and raise a family. And I think maybe you hook them with thinking they're going to come in 7 or 8 years, and maybe they realize that this is a good, like, let's stick it out for the 20 or 30 years, because when I get to 50, Washington State is 53 to retire, 50 you can do with a penalty, but you have a fixed defined benefit income retirement system here in Washington State. And, you know, kind of keep pushing the benefits to them, because I think a lot of kids or young men and women come into this thinking it's going to be a career, and then they choose, maybe something that's disheartening. And I think we as leaders paying attention to them, because I think when they get to 7 years is one of those cyclic parts of their career where they start to be negative or maybe think about moving on, and keeping them engaged. Maybe it's time for them to do something different, offer some training that kind of focuses where they maybe want to stay in law enforcement. I don't know if that's a good answer, because it's hard for me to really think. I guess the big thing is being supportive of what they need. And if they choose to go on, they're a good employee, give them good recommendations and write a letter for them, and what can they do? Because you never know. We're 100,000 people in our community, but they stay in a job here, they're going to be of need potentially to us in the future. We can be partners even if it's not in the law enforcement realm. So
I love that mindset. Thank you. First of all, I also want to give a shout out because one of the reasons that we got connected is because your department is proactive and you have the mindset for wellness. So we know we're going to get into that. We haven't had this conversation before. I've never asked this question. So this is real time, like, okay, let's look at it. And you brought up some really good points that if they're still in your community, they might not work out for your agency, but as long as you keep that relationship and that support, guess what? That is a supportive member of your community that's going to help strengthen. They might not be within the department, but that is going to help in some other facet. Whereas if they leave disgruntled, now you have all these other things. And I think that some leaders, you get in that stressful scarcity. There's not enough bodies on the street. We need this. Now we're losing another guy. We spent all this time. We wasted money and time and resources. Now I got to start over. And there's all of this room for negativity and resentment. But having that healthy approach of like, how can we support them in whatever that is? And that's going to motivate people to want to stay with you longer. So I really like that mindset. Earl and Chris, what say you?
For me, what I've learned that the new recruit today wants to be valued. When we came in, we came in because it was what we wanted to do. We wanted to be in law enforcement. It was a job. We were brought up that you go in, you work hard, you ask questions, but be careful what questions you ask because there's an expectation of you. And so what I've found is that if we can value the individual from the time we start recruiting them, for the time they come and work for us, and then adding to them, showing them what they bring to the table, but adding to them where we're giving them opportunities to grow and develop. And I tell people all the time, my job is to make it hard for them to leave. I realize that they don't all have the same mindset that I do, or that some of the people that have been in law enforcement for a long time. But if we create a team and we value each other, we make it hard for them to leave and go somewhere else because they already know it's going to be different. And so that's when I bring somebody in, I don't have where I'm at in Oklahoma, I don't have a big pool of quality applicants. And so I have to invest in them early on. I may even have to send them to the academy. And so I'm trying to make that connection early on. So when they have that and we do value them, it's really hard for them to wanna go somewhere else, even if somebody else pays more, and there's a lot of people that pay more than we do. But I always tell them, "You're not gonna get the same culture and environment if you go somewhere else because we are here for each other." I will also tell them, "If you wanna leave, if you think you wanna go do something else, whether it's law enforcement or not, my job is still to develop you. My job is still to help you grow." And I think what Chief said there, that also helps build relationships down the road. For me, they don't always stay in the area, but if we can make a connection with someone else, it's not for them to leave disgruntled or upset. Again, I want them to know the value, even if they go somewhere else, that the value that they got from us, they're going to take to another organization, whether it's law enforcement or not.
Mhm. And I think the thing I'm hearing from both of you guys that's consistent is that mentorship, right? That investing in your people so that they'll wanna stay and not wanna leave and go somewhere else. And money, and with this new generation, money's not the issue with them. because any one of them can create a TikTok channel and make millions of dollars on their own, but they want to be a part of something bigger. And if you give them that, they will stay, they will be loyal, but also you're helping them to develop who they are, right? So that eventually they're going to be the leadership within your agency. And I think that is important. And the fact that you brought up, even if they don't stay with the department, but they're within the community, they're still there. And that includes retirees. Those retired officers, those retired deputies, some of them don't move out of state. They stay within the community. And if they're still loyal to you, well, maybe they might come back as a reserve. And that's an extra body you have on the streets, right? So all of that, things that you guys put in place, it gets around, right? In law enforcement, we work on referrals. We talk to each other and we trust. If my buddy who's from the neighboring agency went and saw this psychiatrist or works for this agency and they speak highly of them, I'm probably going to go there, right? I'm probably going to go because of a referral. And word of mouth is the most powerful thing in law enforcement. And so when you do that for your people, it gets around. And before you know it, you have a list of people wanting to get into your agency, right? You're not thinking of scarcity and I need to fill bodies. Here's the thing, here's what we're seeing a lot of in today's world. I need bodies on the street. So here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to lower standards. There is not one elite team out there, and ask the military this. You're not going to develop an elite team by lowering standards just to put bodies on the streets. If anything, you're creating a future problem because you're putting people in uniform that shouldn't be there, right? But the way you guys are going about it, you're cultivating that you're making that culture of elite individuals to come work for you. And on top of that, making a waiting list of people to get in. So no, I applaud you both for doing that. Unfortunately, not everybody thinks the way the two of you guys think.
Hence why we're having these conversations, because I'm hoping these messages make it to the ears of those that need to hear it. We've talked about this too. One of the problems with great leaders is the bad leaders think they're great leaders and they don't listen when other people speak. They think they have all the answers and they're in it for themselves. Unfortunately, that is true for all professions, but there are up and coming leaders and there are really, really great leaders. Um, I can't remember, was it you guys? You guys are fully staffed or you're close?
Our agency, well, we took a $3 million budget hit last year,
Oh,
so
that's
we're fully staffed through attrition. Unfortunately, we went down 12 positions, but I didn't hire. I laid off the hiring so that I didn't have to lay anybody off going into the fall budget season. But we were one over until the kid didn't make his probation last week. But we're fully staffed, and we haven't, knock on wood, we haven't had departures. We don't have any retirements in the near future. So the problem we're running into is the men and women here are really doing a great job. So they're not the city, the governmental interest, the council, et cetera, isn't seeing the hit of the reduction in force because the cops are doing such a great job of what they're doing. So, but my question to them is how long can we keep the pedal down? How long can you keep pushing it? Because eventually there's a breaking point. Can't keep asking and demanding so much of the officers, and then eventually it's gonna unwind because it's burnout, and and that's why we try to. I went in front of our council and they, we're about to pop the dollar figure. I think we spent 1.6 million in overtime, but what I wanted to hit them this year with was the hours. We spent this many hours, this many thousands of hours that our officers weren't home. They're not with their families. They're not spending time with their kids. They're missing birthday parties. Because I just did a presentation last year talking money. The one we just did in the first quarter, I talked hours, not money. So that, keep hitting on hitting on them every time you have a parade or you have a downtown event or we're short on our staffing, the officers are coming out and they're filling those shifts. And that's 20, kids are working 60, 70 hours of overtime in a month. That wears and tears on their body, it wears and tears on their mental health, wears and tears on marriages, the relationships with their kids, all those things. They start getting hurt, they start making mistakes, and those lead to potential future disciplinary issues. And so that's kind of the message I've been trying to push this year. It's not at the dollar figure because money's money, but when it comes to the people, they're the ones that they're taking the brunt of it, really. And so that's kind of the conversation we've been trying to have when I get in front of our council is not the money, not the money part of it, but the actual hours that they're spending away from their families. And you look back, I think Earl probably could talk about it through his career. All the people that when I came into this job, I loved the job, was happy to spend time away from my family because I loved the job too much. And but that was, I mean, we still have officers that make that choice, but they're also the ones that were mandatory sometimes people to come to work, and that's not the choice if they want to come work the overtime. And a lot of this generation isn't that overtime driven, money driven. It's
Mm.
time off. What benefits can you give them that's going to make it a happy place? And I completely agree. It's making it a place to work. You don't have to be the best paying. You can't be the lowest. You can't be the best. You don't have to be the best. It's somewhere in the middle where people want to come to work and they enjoy their job and they feel like you talk about a sense of who they are. I spent a lot of time in uniform. I've spent all of my career except for just shy of 2 years in uniform. I go out and still work. I work till midnight on Friday night and get an opportunity to talk to the cops at where they're at, and have that. It's not unusual. When I started management, you saw management after hours because somebody was in trouble. They're getting served their disciplinary papers or getting their discipline. And so a lot of our management is out and about and their lieutenants have hired. They're out in the field. They're talking to people. They're working nights. They work the weekend just to make the show. I have a captain and I'm on a rant, so I apologize.
No, it's great.
Kind of
Very
made
good.
it a point to cook on Christmas and Easter. We were down here feeding the cops. Came down at noon, came down at 8 at night. He and his partner, they make food, they cook for everybody. I donate money to it. I don't cook, but I'm not great at cooking it. But he's down here on all the holidays. 4th of July, we're planning a county-wide barbecue. We did it last year for all our officers. We cooked for them. We're planning on doing it again this year, inviting all the neighboring agencies to come over. And this is an opportunity because I think that they see us doing the same work as they do is an important part. It's kind of creating that team culture. I think.
I'm
That all
That-
started with a question about we're fully staffed, but so we're
No,
fully
that
staffed.
was so good. There's so much good in that. Thank you. Chris, what were you gonna say?
No, just the fact that you guys are out with your officers patrolling and staying late and, working those odd shifts, it's a big deal. They see that their command is doing what they're doing as well, right? And it creates that connection. It creates a different type of respect. And, I used to have a chief who would do the same thing. He would go do traffic stops or he'd back you up on a traffic stop. He was always in uniform. Very rarely did you ever see him in civilian clothes, but he was always prepared. He was always ready in case he needed to go out there, and that did it. I mean, he did command a lot of respect from his troops because he was out there with us, right? So, yeah, I think that's great. I think, yeah, I love that idea. I love that policing style that you guys have.
That's one of in the coaching realm with our clients, that's one of the biggest complaints or pain points that we hear is that command's so disconnected. They don't know what's going on. They don't know what we need. They're, sitting in their, office and they have no idea. Not realistic. They don't explain. And then of course, communication is always an issue across the board is communication. And I always push back and we unpack that with command and with the person because first you need to have a clear understanding of what communication means to everybody. And I can go on a whole soapbox tangent on that, but I will actually keep that one for now. Um Earl, what about you?
No, on a much smaller scale, we when I got here, so next month will be a year that I've been in my current spot. We were down 8 people, and we only operate with 15 on patrol. So we're running 24/7 with just under half. Knock on wood, I'm 2 away from being fully staffed. Um, Part of that reason is that, unfortunately, I had an officer that was in a motorcycle accident last week, and he did pass. We have all the stuff that we expect, and then the unexpected happens, when you get close, and so sometimes you just have to adapt and keep moving forward, and so our officers also because again, somebody has to work the shift and it's the same people that are moving around. And so we've got some that are in training, but one of the things that I've got a couple people ask is why can't we just put them on the street? And my answer always is because we want them to be well trained and they're going to be your backup one day. And so one of the gripes that they had when I came in is that they didn't train people and they just put them on the street. So it's kind of funny sometimes when there's been poor management, poor leadership, and that's the expectation. And when you come in and you do it differently, automatically they question everything that's different because that's the way they've always done it. They don't know any different. And it does produce the instant partner. It does produce the instant relief of shift, but when they do the work and it's not quality, then someone has to redo it, and then we get back into that same old cycle. And so, you guys are the opposite of me. I don't wear a uniform. There's a reason why. When I got hired, the guy before me unfortunately wore a uniform and hid on night shift. It wasn't what you guys were talking about. It was to avoid the actual daytime connecting with the community and the city manager, and actually to avoid the actual job, which is the flip side of why that's so unfortunate, is that um, he worked a shift, so to speak, but again, he someone else had to do his job that he was supposed to do during the daytime. So when I came in, that was one of the things that I help. I go out there, but I don't wear a uniform. I don't work a shift. But I do connect with the community. I'm out there. I do come in all hours of the night. They do know that I can help them and that I'm part of that. Although I did have to remind them the other day that I do know how to drive a patrol car. Um, uh, that was we were going somewhere to pick up one, and somebody said, "Well, I'll just ride with you." I said, "You do know I can still drive a car." So there's ways to connect even when you don't wear that. But I think our problem is universal when it comes to manpower and keeping people there. You do have those that will work themselves to the bone, and you do have those that they as soon as they have the opportunity, they want the time. I want them to have the time. I don't want them to have to do it the same way we did, but I do want them to understand the respect and the things that the job still has to be done. That I'm always looking to help make sure that their mental health is where it's supposed to be. Uh, so we do have those that claim that they work really hard, but they're not working any overtime. They're working their shift, and I've got some that every time there's overtime, they're filling in, not necessarily because they need it, because they know that the department needs it, because if they don't, we don't have someone to fill that spot. However, again, we are turning that around with quality training. We've got 3 that'll be on street in the next month or so, and so that mindset is getting there where the mental health is also getting to the level of everybody understand it. They know that some people can say it, but they're not actually experiencing it. I think that's probably the rub for a lot of us, is that the ones that usually talk about it are really not the ones that are experiencing the burnout or the heavy lifting. They're the complainers that want they want everybody to think that they're doing it when everybody else is actually the one doing it.
There's so much. Well, Chris, and it all ties in with duty driven. So I want you to kind of talk about. Do you want to just jump into it?
No, I mean, Earl, what you're talking about is sometimes you got those officers that'll stay late, they'll come in off duty if they're needed, right? And they become the go-to people, right? This is what we call their what is it? What term am I using? And it's going to be a simple
Overinvestment?
term too. Well, no, it's overinvestment, but they become reliable.
Oh,
Is what I'm looking for, right? They become reliable, and so what ends up happening? We call them all the time to come in and fill in. And it's gonna work for a certain period of time, but eventually they're going to get burned out, right? Because they're not taking care of stuff at home because they're too busy at work. Now, the individuals that, they don't wanna stay late, they don't wanna stay an hour late, they wanna go home when their shift is over. We gotta look at them too, because what is happening on the back end to where they want to disconnect from work almost immediately, right? Because there could be some underlying issues that they're dealing with already. They could already be in burnout, right? And sadly, in law enforcement, we're great at supporting each other, but we're also great at eating each other, eating our own, right? We
Yep.
smell blood in the water, and then now we're piranhas, right? Instead of and we are so creative, we can come up with nicknames for people, right? Retired on duty. If somebody's never coming in, never staying late, or they're calling in sick all the time, we call them rods, retired on duty. But if we look back, instead of giving them a nickname and making fun of them and talking behind their back, let's look at their work history. Were they ever productive? Were they high performers? Were they those individuals that were always staying late and coming in when needed? And now all of a sudden they're the opposite, right? That is what we call duty-driven deterioration. They were overinvested in the very beginning, And because that went unchecked, now they're in what we call burnout. And in the burnout phase, this is where usually people start to question whether or not they want to stay. So, for as leaders, you guys want to, what do you guys have in place to actually address some of those issues when you recognize it? When you recognize that young officer who's always staying late, how do you guys prevent him from or her from burning out? Or that officer who's always negative and they're always just in a bad mood and they don't like staying late, even though they've been here for 10 plus years, they know what they're doing, but they're just in this negative mindset. Is there anything you guys have in place to help them and to get them through this?
Well, I think our agency's got a couple. Well, I mean, we have a pretty good. I think we spoke at that our agency does a pretty good job of trying to help our employees. We have peer support. We've got chaplains. We have a psychologist that we can call. We have two actually that we can call. Um, I think it comes down to making sure that educating your first line supervisors, that keeping an eye on those young men and women that you see that, and it's not always maybe you start to see the disciplinary stuff, and we expanded. The last year, I tried to do performance improvement plans more than the disciplinary issues. What is the root cause of why they're getting themselves in trouble? And I think um, having some empathy for what they're going through too. I mean, I've got a kid that he's been to see me about 3 times in the last couple of years, and rather than raising the bar on what its discipline is and taking into account the totality of what the circumstances are, and he's been held accountable and he's been disciplined, but it's not. I think we as a command group talked about how can we do this without making him be the owner of getting better. We've tried the performance improvement plan where it put more work on the supervisors. Now the work's on him to be successful. He has to do the work on his end and creating habits for him. The supervisor managing them isn't working. So now he's got to, hopefully what we've got him going through is he does the work that his supervisor, he's got to report it to his supervisor. And I think it comes down to empathy for the person. And then again, we have mandatory, you can't work so many hours in a week. And we've actually had to get a kid that we had to stop because he got over that, which is unusual. But I think it's communicating with him, staying in touch with him. But the hard part is that I think I've seen some circumstances through our years where people started to deteriorate at home, drug and alcohol addiction. Um, yeah, an officer that got shot early in my career, and there was no empathy for him. He said, "I can't stop cars," and because he got shot on a traffic stop. And I remember sitting in a briefing one day, and they're like, "We'll figure it out, or you're gonna have a job, looking for a new job." But I'm like, "That's not the." Those are you talk about kind of key moments in your career where that kind of help shape who you are. Like, how do you get that guy to be able to stop cars? And maybe it's going to take a couple of years, and you find an alternate assignment for him. Encourage him to take a different position. And not everybody is going to be the hard driven cop and identifying what their strengths or weaknesses are and try to build off on the weaknesses. But if their strengths there are certain things, maybe point them in a direction. Maybe it's time to get off the road. Maybe it's time to take a specialty and do something different. But it's hard because a lot of those guys and gals, they are so driven, and then it hits a wall, and that's like all of a sudden they hit that wall, and then how do you fix that problem? I think it's having empathy for them and try to work with them to keep their career going in the path forward to where they don't either choose to separate or they continue down the road where they're going to get disciplined. And I think we have, like I said, we have a pretty robust peer support, and the lieutenant that's taking in charge and is running it right now. He's making sure that they're checking in with these guys and gals because unfortunately, for a city of 100,000, we have a lot of violence. Unfortunately, I mean, we average between 10 and 15 homicides in a year. I'm not to go on with the fatal car wreck and the suicide and just people dying. I mean, it's that cumulative effect is what I think what we're talking about. How do you get to 53 for us, retirement age, and enjoy yourself? And how do we have a good meeting when we meet? Something our former chief, a lot of the things I do now came from former chiefs or former ideas. And we bring in lieutenants or captains, and then we bring in line level employees, and we meet with a new hire and talk about what's your career going to look like. This is what if you get to have an opportunity to look at the end of your career, what things you wish you knew at the time when you get hired. And we sit down and we kind of round robin it and talk about what's going to help you be successful. What are you going to go through? What things got pitfalls that you experience that had caused hiccups in your career. I think that was one thing like one of our former chiefs did that. And I think that we've got to continue it because I think it is a great learning experience for the kids that are coming on because I think when we all get hired, we're excited for it and we want to go out and run again, stop cars, but you don't look at the backside of this, what this all looks like 20, 30 years down the road and where you're at, where you're at mentally, physically, are you divorced a couple times or you're paying child support, all those things that aren't the positives of this. And not all marriages crumble because of policing, but we don't want to be the reason why you get to the end of your career and you're over invested in policing and now you're under invested in your family. And then all of a sudden you're you're not happy at home, you're not happy at work, and that person becomes an angry person. You like you said, retired on duty, or. But what can even you have to realize the expectation too. And when you have 25, 30 years on, you're not the 1 to 5 year cop that's out there running against some. We have some that are. We got some 15, 20 year. Probably two of our hardest workers are over 20 years. And that's hard because they want some of these young kids to look at that and go, "Hey, I want to be like that." That's a motivation, hopefully. But I think it's staying engaged and having supervisors that stay engaged because they're going to say, I don't know everybody's daily routine, but the sergeants giving them training and giving them the latitude to have these conversations, or hope that they have promoting the right people and they're willing to have that conversation with somebody when something looks like it's not right. I think a lot of supervisors won't have that that one-on-one conversation. Hey, why are you slipping in this realm? So I kind of get where you're going. I mean, I think it's just being, like I said, being engaged and how do you, getting the right people that will have that conversation. There's a lot of supervisors I know early in my career will just let it go. They're not going to get involved in that hard conversation to fix the problem.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, like, for me, and it's a little easier for me, I'm in a smaller agency, but one of the things I try to teach all of my supervisors is you have to have those hard conversations. For me, I'm very, uh determined and disciplined in watching my folks, and so we have a very positive, atmosphere, and so, when we see the negative, there's usually an underlying issue of why somebody's being negative or they're exhibiting a certain behavior, and so if we're creating the environment and the culture that is positive and we're looking at each other, the best thing we have is each other. Is that when someone feels off or something seems off, then it's not just the supervisor, it's also the officer that's next to them. And if we're communicating with each other, and I'll ask them hard questions, I'll ask them what's going on. I learned a long time ago that if you don't ask the hard question, it goes unanswered. And our coping mechanisms over the years are not great. And so, for me, is that I'll ask the hard question. I'll be blunt. I'll say, "What's going on?" Because you're not acting like yourself. Um, you gotta let us help you. You gotta let me help you. We have avenues that we can send them to talk to people. I just tell them if they don't want to talk to me, then I've got some people they can talk to. I don't have to know what it's about. I don't have to know what's going on. I will just know that you went because I got to pay the bill. Um, but creating the environment where it's okay to have a difficult question, creating the environment where it's okay to not be okay for a minute. I always let them know that if you're not okay, you can't go do the job. If you're dealing with something and it goes unchecked, you're not okay to go to the job. And I'll use examples. Look at some of the people that we deal with on our calls. What's some of their issues? It's never really why we're there or why the behavior is becoming what it is. There's always an underlying issue. And so for me, it's teaching my supervisors how to do that, myself how to do that. Those are the times when I walk around, when I'm riding with them, when I'm out there, when I'm in places that they didn't expect me to be. That you create that where they will talk to you, they will communicate with you. I've had more conversations about marriages and families and all kind of stuff other than law enforcement because I've created that and been available to talk about that. And I will tell them sometimes is like, if you paint yourself into this corner where I can't help you, it's a lot more difficult than if you talk to me in the beginning and allow me to help you from the start. We can get through a lot of stuff if we look out for each other as opposed to, if you think I'm going to deal with it, I'm going to keep it inside. And unfortunately, in my career, I've dealt with a lot of those things where it taught me that you always got to be looking out for and teaching the supervisors and the other people to look out for each other, because somebody put it best. Those are check engine lights. They come on, your body changes, your facial expression changes, your demeanor, your attitude changes. The signs are there. We just miss them or we ignore them. And so creating the atmosphere where we're better at recognizing the check engine lights, and we know, instead of just letting it run till it falls apart, we talk. And maybe I can't give you everything that you need, but I can direct you to somebody that can. And so I think that's helped us tremendously, have those things where we don't have nearly as much of the burnout. We understand the mental health, and it's okay to talk about it as opposed to, I don't want anybody to know. I've actually had more people tell us in debriefs and those kind of things because of what we're talking about. I didn't even know that they were talking to somebody. They brought it up to show that it's okay for somebody else. And today in law enforcement, I think that's huge.
Well, you know, Earl, to what you're talking about, and Shawn, you mentioned you have 2 20-plus year officers that are still out there being proactive and they're a great example for that younger generation. The 2 of you, those officers, that's what we call that experience, we call that gold. That is gold right there. Because how did you guys get to your level 30+ years in? How did those 2 officers with 20+ years in and still going, what did they do right, to get there? What did they do wrong, right? So that the new generation can avoid doing that. That's the conversation I think that would really help that younger generation, and on top of that, motivate that older generation that, "Hey, I can contribute. I can still be a part of this," right? So, I think that's great, and I think that is a conversation we need to have. We're great at talking to the public and fixing problems out there in public, but we have a problem talking to each other. When it comes to personal stuff between us, we don't know how to talk to each other, sadly, and sadly, we isolate. Tammy, did you have something?
Well, and yeah, to unpack what you were saying with that, there's a couple things. Unfortunately, there are people in departments that do not have great leadership. They do not have people like you. It is not a safe environment to talk. It's not a safe environment to say there's something going on with me. I think we're getting better, and that's all the more reason why we have conversations like this. Again, hoping it gets to somebody and make a little shift. Um, there's a couple things that you guys said. So you nailed it with the underlying issues. If you have, and this whoever's listening, departments, people, command staff, if you have somebody that was, a high performer, they were doing stuff and now they're just making dumb calls. They have that bad attitude, all of these things. Back in the day, that would get you fired. That would get you, in trouble. We have to do better. Period. We just have to do better and be like, what's going on? A lot of it's self-sabotage. A lot of it is not even conscious. They don't even know. They know that they're being a jerk, but they don't really know why. And Shawn, you said you guys had an actual shooting and that was causing hesitation and can't do that. One of the things, again, from the coaching standpoint, one of the things that a lot of officers and personnel are carrying is the almost nothing actually happened. And so they really don't talk about it because they're having hesitation, but nothing happened. So what's wrong with me? Why am I feeling this way? It was fine. Nothing happened. And now I'm scared or whatever, but I can't tell anybody. And so everybody, people are sitting in their own internal self sabotage and spiraling out. Or they haven't even got that far because Chris and I teach about self-awareness all the time and people lack that self-awareness. So they just know that something's off, but they don't know what it is. They don't even know and they're scared to talk. So to emphasize, we're all saying if it is not safe within your agency to talk to somebody, there are people everywhere coaching. There's people out there to talk. You can reach out to anybody, go to any one of our podcasts. You can reach out. There's a plethora of people. Talk to somebody, somebody. And for the most part, the agencies are getting better. Um, as I say that, there are also some agencies that when we ask what their wellness, continued wellness, what are we calling it?
Wellness continuum.
Wellness continuum. What is that? And, they're like, well, we have EAP. And then we're like, cool. How I'm in crisis. How do I get in touch? And they're like, and they don't know. So the first thing, if you have peer support, you have chaplains, you have EAP, you need to know how your people can access them. Because no offense to cops, but cops need simple. They're not going to go click more than one link to go find something. One button, big bold font color. That's what Chris created everything. When Chris created Duty Driven Deterioration, our workbook, it was so simple that I was like, you can't be serious. And then we took it out into the world and they're like, this is so great. I'm like, okay, I will never doubt you again.
Hey, that's from teaching police, 20 plus years of teaching police. Keep it simple, use big font, use a lot of color, and feed them, and you're good.
One thing that I think Earl talked about is peers, because I went to a training and we brought in some people in our community to talk about leadership, and he talked about, and I don't know, probably if you've heard it, but the backpack analogy. On the outside it looks great, and inside it could be either super organized or just everything stuffed in there. And unfortunately for us, or especially even leadership positions, unless you're really picking up on those cues, you don't know what's going on in their life outside of that. And I kind of use that. We see the outside of the backpack all clean coming to work, and they may be doing fine at work, but their peers have that knowledge of what somebody knows what's really going on in their life. And I think Earl hit it on the head with the peers have to be willing to speak up, and that's hard. I mean, I was a union rep through a big part of my career and dealt with a lot of things. And one of my friends ended up dying of an overdose after he was fired. And could I have done more? Looking back in my career, could I have done more? I know our agency could have done more, in hindsight, but hindsight's 2020, and so learn from that and move forward. But I think a lot of peers and a lot of first level supervisors knew there were issues with this one officer, and nobody really addressed it through years and years. Now, I think it was funny, not funny, but I was at his graveside today. My buddy and I went, and he left some flowers for him, and we stopped by his graveside. Another deputy that took his own life earlier this morning, we went by, and we talked about had that set of circumstances occurred now, I think that the one officer who ended up overdosing would not have. He would if he got fired, it wouldn't have been because it was let go for long periods of time. He would have been forced into either attending up, fixing himself before he got himself arrested, and a bunch of other stuff led to where he was at. But I think law enforcement has changed for the better in that aspect. I think we would have intervened in a different manner today than we did 20 plus years ago. I didn't realize that he had died 15 years ago. It was just hard to believe 15 years had passed so much. But it was just a weird, I think dynamics have changed. I think management will take a different approach now. It wasn't all disciplinary, And we had a former chief that offered him an opportunity, but there wasn't the, hey, you're going to do this. And I think that would have helped him because he wasn't ready to make a change. And ultimately, they have to be ready. But our chief at the time offered it to him, and then nobody really followed up. After he walked out the door, he just kind of continued on, and then it went downhill from there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think sometimes we have to, as leaders and chiefs, back in 2015, I lost an officer line of duty. And when I addressed the officers, I basically told them, I'm ordering you to go see, and we had a psychologist that was on standby, and I told them, I'm ordering you to go see her one time. You go see her one time. If you never see her again, it's okay. But you're going to have to go one time. And the reason I did that, because I knew if I left it up to them, three-quarters of them never would have went and seen her. There would have been a couple because they knew who she was. They had already seen her. The majority of them saw her more than once. There's only a couple that didn't come back and say, "I'm glad you made me go." Most of them did, and so I'll tell my city manager if I've got something going on. If I see, I'm going to give them a chance, especially like just losing the officer that wasn't line of duty. I'm going to give them a chance to make a decision and be okay and do that. But I already told her that if I see behavior that doesn't line up with their getting their own help, I'm going to order them to go. I think we have to. I know some people would be like, "Oh my gosh, you ordered them to go. We weren't ready." No one is ever going to be ready. No one ever thinks that they're ready to go talk. It's one of those that sometimes we have to force the issue because if we're left of our own accord, we're always going to say, "No, I'm good." I'll go when I get ready. I'm not this or that," because those people know how to get them to open up way better than we do. And so sometimes I would just rather be the bad guy if that's what it takes to get them to level mentally, physically, and all that stuff spiritually that they need to get to. I'll take that hit if I have to, and I think more of us need to be that way in order to make sure that it does 2 things. One, no one's gonna point the finger at you if I make you all go. If I say we're all gonna go, then we're all gonna go. Who's gonna make fun of that? 2, leaving it up to your decision isn't always the best thing because you're the one that's dealing with whatever trauma or trigger that's happening, and we don't make the best decisions when we're dealing with those kind of things.
Earl, you bring up such a great point, mandating certain things. You're going to send somebody to see a mental health professional, and sometimes even putting it in policy. If you respond to a child drowning, you're going to participate in a CISM debrief or a diffusing, and then you're going to get a day off to go see a mental health professional, right? If you put it in policy, nobody's going to argue that. And plus, they know what to expect. Okay, I went to this type of call, now I know what to expect after that, right? Because 'Cause you're right. You give somebody the option to do it, we're not gonna do it. We're good, right? It comes down to that self-awareness, and one of the things my old agency did is they did that. They put mandatory, "You're gonna go see a mental health professional if you experience X, Y, and Z," type of calls, right? And that was great because we knew exactly what was gonna happen. The other thing too is, my old chief, man, he did was he said, "Every year, schedule a, physical with your physician. If you schedule a physical, you get 10 hours off." So, basically, you get a shift off just to go do that, and so, what we would do is I'd schedule my physical at, 8 AM, get done by 10, and I have the rest of the day to do whatever I want. I have a whole, so to me, I'm like, "Heck yeah, I'm winning," right? But what's happening? I'm actually going and getting a physical done,
Yep.
right? Little things like that actually help, and then he also, implemented the last hour of shift, making it your admin hour, so you can work out on duty if you want, if you're caught up on paperwork, or, you're that last hour of shift, you can come off the street, 'cause the way we had scheduled our patrol shifts, they were overlapping. So you could get off that last hour of shift, get off the street, come in. If you're caught up on paperwork, you can work out. You can go roll on the mat if you're training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or go to the gym and lift weights, or go run around the block a few times, whatever you want that last hour of shift. And that to me was great because that showed that they're investing in their people and in us, and they actually care about us. So it makes a big difference. But mandating it, sometimes it helps. The ego puts the ego in check, right?
Well, especially if you have somebody that you know is dealing with something, especially addiction. So I'll just say if you're a leader and you know that there is something, they're drinking too much or whatever, it is going to be a tough love approach. You have to. And whether they stay with the agency or not, you as a person know, like, hey, you're going to help get them because they will not until they hit rock bottom, and rock bottom has a basement type thing. They're not going to go get themselves help. They do need somebody to kind of kick their butt through the door. And that is good leadership. Um, I love the conversation. I love the mindset because that is what we teach. We're constantly helping people reframe the mindset. And you guys have already looked at things. You had also said, uh, you know, Earl, you had said earlier about in order to keep your people, they need to feel valued. And the younger generation, whether they're coming in thinking they're going to spend 20, 30 years in the career, or maybe they just want to try it and see if they like it, either way, they need to feel valued. And one of the biggest things, again, that we hear, I'm giving for anybody listening, we talk, this is what we do. We coach cops, we talk to people, and we're hearing it. So I'm kind of the mouthpiece for the problems. So anybody that's listening, I'm giving you a blueprint. Take care of your people, they will stay. Now, I will say when we very, 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 very first started, we were talking about we're going to help your department with retention. And I think about 5 of our first clients that worked with coaches, I very quickly realized we could not promise retention because they all lateraled out of their agency. And I was like, oh shit, that's a problem. So take off the word retention. I cannot promise you retention. But what I can promise is if somebody's working with us specifically If somebody decides to lateral out of an agency or to leave the profession, whatever that is, it is not coming from a disgruntled, F this, I'm out, I'm done, like nobody listen, da 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 da. It's not going to be from a emotionally reactive and volatile place. It's a well thought out, this, I'm not going to get what I want out of this agency. Unfortunately, some of the ones that had lateraled out, they did not have good leaders. They didn't have leaders that showed up, kind of, Earl, what you were talking about. You had the ones that were hiding out on a shift. You never saw them, did not have an open door policy, didn't listen to you, punished you if you tried to say anything. And they had to do what was best for them. I can say the ones that have all left, they're in other agencies and they're thriving and they love it. So had the leaders valued their people, invested in their people. And Shawn, I love the way that you're taking the approach that stop looking at the dollars. Everybody's looking at the dollars. Money, money, money. You're bringing the humanity back into it. And I think that's where we're missing, especially with law enforcement. I think everybody kind of forgets about the human being. And that is to look at the hours. That is just kudos to you for having that mindset and bringing that awareness, especially to the decision makers and the ones that are very dollar focused. Going to Chris's duty driven deterioration and to the retention issues too. I always say this, it's not, a lot of people think it's the hard calls. I'm like, it's not the hard calls. You guys do have support for hard calls and you do have each other. If you have a legit hard call, there is no stigma around saying, hey, I'm having a hard time. There isn't. It's the internal battles, the at home battles, and the nail in the coffin for somebody to decide if they're going to stay or go is usually made at home. They're losing their family, they're getting a divorce, they don't have, connection with their kids. That's going to be the indicator of how that person is going to show up in their life, their career, and all of that. So if we're taking care of the people, you guys are, our next let's see, what month are we? Yep. So we're doing what makes a great leader. The next topic is connecting with community and what that looks like, because we do need to start bridging that gap. There needs to be education to the community because I don't think a lot of people, besides what they're seeing on news and social media and TikTok, they don't have a freaking clue how to interact with cops. And a lot of the stuff that's out there is wrong. Don't do that. We're going to unpack all of that. But I absolutely love the approach you guys are taking. I'm thankful that I did have you guys come on to this particular topic. You kind of proved that I was right. What makes a great leader? You guys know some stuff.
Well, I've done some things right and done some things wrong, but I hopefully learned from the things I've done wrong. And I think that that's the biggest part of where I think I'm at is being open to trying new ideas. And I think saying that I was wrong about something is huge. It's like none of us have all the answers. None of us are always right. So,
100%.
No, I think that's fundamental because when I teach some of the classes that I teach, people always are, I won't say amazed, but they don't understand the fact that I will tell them the mistakes that I've made, because it got me to where I am today. And so I don't think if we're not learning from them, we're not growing. If we're not growing, we're not being the kind of leaders that we should be. And so I tell people all the time, it's like, I'm going to open up to you because I hope you don't make the same mistakes that I do. I hope that I'm teaching you something that will keep you on an easier path. That is how we learn. But hopefully some of us won't make some of the same mistakes that we have. But I think it's huge that we learn that because I think that is how we grow. I think that is how we have opportunities and we take them. And I've learned and figured out or across the way that if people are not admitting and learning from their mistakes, they're not growing. And they're usually the ones that are the toxic ones that are stagnant, that are actually pulling everybody else down. And Tami, one last thing I wanted to say was that, sometimes we were talking about, people, we're still supporting them if they go somewhere else. Sometimes they're just not a good fit. And it's not because they're a bad person. It's not because we're a bad agency. I tell people all the time, I'm hiring for fit. I'm not necessarily hiring the most experienced, and not because I don't have a bunch of them applying, but part of that is I'm actually hiring for fit. We can teach them the job. We can teach them how to be cops, but I can't teach them how to fit in with the team and be part of the team. I can only do so much of that. So sometimes they'll thrive somewhere else because they've actually found the team that they were meant to be on.
I love that, and 100% because you guys also had talked about promoting the right people, but because you do need to have we talked about culture in law enforcement all the time, and a lot of departments have a toxic culture. Whether they're good on the street or not, you get back into the agency and it's a toxic internal culture. It doesn't have to be that way. And, with our team, we're coming up on our retreat that we're doing, and we had our retreat last year. And one of the things that the team all realized, we have a team of about 20 law enforcement professionals from all different ranks. We got chiefs, detectives, we got dispatch, we have everybody. And usually in a group, you have some sort of drama or disconnect. Knock on wood. I really don't want to jinx myself on this, but we didn't have any. We had no drama. We had everybody got along, and everybody really likes each other. And we have really. I can go to sleep at night. I love my team. I talk so highly of my team. I'm so thankful for the whole team, and we are bringing some more people in. We had a lot of people. I actually took off the become a coach part of our website because we were getting so many applicants. And I'm like, I don't need to have everybody be a coach. I want the right people, that vibe, that same culture. And that is so important because there have been some people that they'd be great coaches. They are great coaches, they're great, doing their thing, but they weren't the right fit for our team. Wish them well, but it wasn't us. So I love that you take that approach too, because so going back, we had Don Miguel Ruiz Jr. on our podcast a couple weeks ago. I highly recommend that everybody reads the book, The Four Agreements. And I say that because don't take anything personal. If it's not the right vibe for your culture, Shawn is that, do a letter of recommendation, put your support personally, introduce them to another agency that they might jive with better. Because as we echoed too, in law enforcement, that word of mouth is everything. Everything. So, no, I absolutely 100%. Yes.
I listened to your book. I listened to that book after you mentioned it.
Oh, yeah?
Mhm.
Yay, see? I love what we do. It's so awesome. Um, well, I wanna honor your guys' time, and this was a great conversation. We could talk for hours. I genuinely, first of all, genuinely thank you for being great leaders and having the mindset, having the humility and the humbleness to say, "Hey, what else can we do?" And one of the reasons I love doing the podcast too is because we all take away something. When we very first started, we had a chief on, and he was like taking notes the whole time, and that was the first time that had happened. And I was like, "What's he doing?" And then he came away with so much that the next couple episodes, like everybody's taking notes. I'm like, we're all learning from each other, so I just love it. Um, in true fashion, if somebody were to just tune into this last little piece of the podcast, what is your 2-second mic drop piece of advice or guidance that you have to someone that's tuning in that they need to know about leadership?
Keep your ego out of it. I just wrote a book called Leading Without Ego. I think it's one of the things that gets us in so much trouble. I think from the newest to the oldest, most experienced, if you can just leave your ego at the door and be open and adaptable, I think you would go a long way.
I think the biggest thing I can say is value your people and the people that are doing the job and engage with them and want them, try to make them be as successful as you can. Because I think the hardest thing that people need to think of is not what I did, it's what they do. Because the people that are going to make or break Earl and I in our roles aren't us. It's the people that are sitting out and going out. And the face of your agency shouldn't be me or Earl. It should be the people that are out there interacting daily. And if we're going to have a successful career and represent our community well. It's not what we're doing; it's what they're doing. And so, give them the tools and the ability, and then and really be involved with them as much as you can. And it's going to depend on the size of your agency, but be engaged with them and want the best for them because they're going to make or break you as a leader.
Chris?
I think I would say, have accountability for yourself at the individual level, right? We train in tactics so that if we need him on the street, we can use him, right? We wear our body armor, we wear our gear in case we meet the boogeyman on the street. Um, but what are we doing for our mental mindset, right? Because, it's our mindset really that's gonna be our armor, because 'cause we're gonna see things throughout a 20 plus year career that most people won't see. So what are we doing to prepare ourselves for that? How do we process stress? How do we process trauma? How do we open those lines of communication? If you've got nothing in place, you're not ready. You're not prepared. right? So what are you doing today? What can you do today to prepare your mind for that one day when you're going to need it? Because we're cops, we're great at putting on the happy face and going to work and hiding it from everybody. In the meantime, we're isolating on the inside. So prepare now. What are you doing? What do you have in place when you need to talk to somebody? All right, Tammy, turn it over to you.
Well, my last little piece is, and I don't mean this in a self serving way at all, but to share the podcast because somebody needs to hear there's so much gold in these episodes. There's so much wisdom from you guys that I hope that somebody watches or listens to this and is like, how can I do that? I'm already doing that. And if you're already doing that, some of this stuff, that's great. Like, own that, celebrate that, and then build on it as well. And if you're not, and if you don't know how, you're like, "Okay, that sounds great. I wish we could do that." It's baby steps. It is baby steps. Make one little improvement, 1% better each day to get you to this next point. And if you're somebody that's also listening, being like, "Yeah, that's great. My department would never do that." Da 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 da. Well, the mark of a leader, start leading. You might not be able to change the entire department. You might have really toxic command staff or leaders, but you yourself do not have to be that person. You can, don't let everybody else dictate how you show up, and it will trickle out. So that is my last little piece of advice. Thank you guys all for being here. To the audience tuning in, like, subscribe, do the things, and until next week.